One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. This is the best day of the week, and not just because the weekend is almost here, because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm Vice President of the Heartland Institute. We are an organization that has been around for 41 years, and we are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. The Heartland Institute and this show bring the world the data, the science, the truth to counter that climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends with you next time to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And also like, share, and subscribe, and leave your comments underneath this video. All of these very easy tasks convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program. And that gets in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not really approve of the way that we cover climate and energy policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to help this program, and I sure hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can join other friends of this program who help bring it to the world every single week. And of course, before we get started, we want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and Heartland UK Europe. We have a very big show today, so let's get started. We have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts. He's the senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That. We have Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Rancherbury, who is also the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and Linnea Lueken, research fellow for energy and environment policy at Heartland, and of course, Andy Singer, our producer behind the curtain, making sure that this show looks and flows wonderfully. And we want to welcome back to the show again our friend Steve Milloy. Steve Milloy is the climate hoax slayer, and he's also the founder and publisher of junkscience.com. He's a fellow at the Energy and Environmental Legal Institute and a board member of the Heartland Institute, and a burr in the side of climate alarmists on X and all social media everywhere. So welcome, everyone. Nice hat, Sterling. And how you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
I can say with some confidence that there will be ranting today.
We've never doubted that, Sterling.
Yes.
It's official now, though. I'm wearing the mitre.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say maybe we can hope for a blessing from you, but I don't know if that's exactly what you dispense with that on your head. But we'll see how as the show develops what happens.
No sacrilegious stuff from me.
Yeah.
That.
Well, already having a good time. That's great. Now, before we get rolling, right before we came to air, Anthony Watts asked for the floor to make a very special announcement. The floor is yours, Anthony.
Thank you very much. I want to let everybody know that whatsupwiththat.com is back online tentatively. The migration that we've had to the new system went very slow. We had all kinds of hiccups and problems. And so we're back in a sort of a provisional way. You can, there are new posts, there's new content, there's new comments, but we're still on the old system. We're moving the new system over, and then we're going to have to switch it. So some of these stories that we're running over yesterday, today, and into the weekend might be throwaways that we're not going to see continued. But feel free to visit and use the content as you normally do and make comments as you normally will. And then hopefully next week we will get all of this resolved.
Fantastic. I know a lot of your regular readers were a little worried that you were sabotaged or something horrible happened, but nope, it's just routine maintenance, and those things take time. All right. Well, let's get started with the show, as we always love to do, with the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. All right. Our first item of crazy climate news comes from the Daily Mail. Should you make your dog a vegan? The headline says, now even dogs are being told to go vegan. Plant-based foods provide similar nutrients to meat-based diets for pooches, vets claim. Let me read a little bit from the story and we'll get some commentary. They're usually found begging for a sausage or a bit of chicken from your dinner plate, but giving your dog a chunk of meat or even a bone to chew on might soon be a thing of the past, according to a new study. We'll see. Experts have discovered that vegan options for dogs sold in the UK provide similar nutrition to meat-based diets. Quote, our study found that plant-based diets, when properly formulated, can be a healthy and viable alternative to meat-based options, unquote, said lead author Rebecca Brosiak from the University of Nottingham's School of Veterinary Medicine and Science. Quote, ideally, the next step is long-term feeding studies, but as we begin to rethink pet nutrition, perhaps the alternative isn't only better for the planet, but also beneficial for our four-legged companions. As plant-based diets gain popularity in human nutrition, the pet food industry is following suit with vegan diets becoming increasingly common. It could mean that instead of eating food made from chicken, lamb, and beef, more dogs will soon be given meals consisting of sweet potatoes, carrot flakes, and pea protein. Yum, yum, yum.
No more.
All right.
No
Now, Linnea, you're going to be our dog correspondent now. You have a dog that often joins the show,
Yes.
at least in sound. I mean, a dog would really never choose to be a vegan, right? You know, this is a cruel lifestyle choice imposed by humans to save the planet.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. At most, a dog would choose to be a omnivore, I guess. Or at least I've been trying to get my dog to stop being an omnivore, eating every single thing that she picks up off the ground outside. So they're really not known for being picky eaters necessarily, unless you have one of those dogs that's like a little bit neurotic, which happens from time to time. But they are not going to do well on a vegan diet, and I would say it's unnatural and it's cruel, actually. I think probably to try to make an animal that's basically a carnivore do something else. It's kind of like there's been a saying that's been around for a long time, which is if you've ever seen a cat, a dog, or a child that's a vegan, they didn't make that choice. And it holds true. It continues to hold true. My dog likes frozen vegetables, as well as eating random plants in my yard. But she really likes a frozen cut of like a femur bone that I will sometimes get her from the grocery store. So I think if dogs got a vote on this, they would vote no.
Look, these people say they love nature, that we should follow nature. Dogs descended from wolves. We have twisted through weird manipulations, through crossbreeding and such, to produce things that don't look anything like wolves anymore. I admit they're weird, strange things, but evolutionarily, folks, they're meat eaters. That wolves don't run to the cornfields and take down an acre of corn to dine. They don't jump in to the vegetable patch and ravage it so the farmers have to scare them off with guns. It's the cattle raisers and the wildlife and the sheep raisers that worry about wolves. That's what dogs are. They're canines. They're in that family. This lady and anyone, she's a vet. Actually, she should be locked up for, they have some pretty strong animal cruelty laws over in England. I think she should be locked up for animal cruelty because she's trying to force something that's unnatural because they think it's best. Vegetables aren't best for dogs. If they were, they would have been eating vegetables and grazing. The only time my dog wants to voluntarily, Linnea's right. If I throw my dog some vegetables, he'll eat almost anything. But the only time he goes out and seeks things like plants, it's when he eats grass to make himself sick.
You know, I really like this poll that they have here on the website. Would you give your dog vegan food? And a resounding 80% said no. Gosh. You know, what I think we should do is we should post the URL of this particular page up in the comments and allow our readers to go weigh in. And we might be able to push that up to over 90%. A little hacking going on there.
And those who date or marry them.
What?
Steve, you're muted. Somehow your audio is gone. Oh my God. You people in the audience have no idea. We spent half an hour getting Steve's audio perfect. And now we can't hear him at all.
Cut off.
He's cut off. All right.
Sad.
We're going to have Steve enter, maybe exit the studio right now, Steve, and maybe come back. Is that a good idea, Andy? Let's do that. Pop out and come back, or just hit refresh your page and we'll see if we can get you in here. Yep. Live TV. What are you going to do? Happens once in a while, but it is really, it seems like there's a curse when it comes
There's
to
that
Steve
Amazon
Milloy's
drone
audio.
when we need it.
Yeah, I will say, Sterling, you said that dogs don't like jump into the cabbage patch to ravage the cabbages, but my dog ravaged a potted lemon tree one time for fun.
But that's the point. It's for fun.
He wasn't after the lemons.
They'll chew on anything, right?
She was ruining my tree. Yeah.
No, a fence post.
Yeah.
You know, they'll chew on anything, but that doesn't mean that's what they prefer to dine on.
Absolutely.
Great.
Steve's
Okay,
got
Steve's
the,
coming back. I want to know what
Steve
he wants.
Milloy is sort of
to do.
coming back. We'll
the little squirrel is on the wheel.
Yeah, we will see. Actually, my second crazy climate news item, he was going to lead off on it since he is an attorney. So we'll do a little freelancing here. We'll move to the third item, and we'll get back to the climate grift clawback in a moment. So this item, the NBA climate scam scandal, found this in Western Journal, and actually this was, if you're a sports fan, an NBA fan, you probably saw a lot of this on social media over the last week. This comes from the Western Journal. The headline is, LA Clippers allegedly skirted NBA salary cap with help from fraudulent tree planting company. Yeah. So yeah, let me read a little bit here from this. LA Clippers and owners, the LA Clippers and owner Steve Ballmer have been accused of circumventing the NBA salary cap through a $28 million no-show job for star player Kawhi Leonard through a, quote, fraudulent tree planting company, according to reports. Pablo Torre, a podcaster and former ESPN contributor, reported Wednesday that Ballmer allegedly funneled money to Leonard through Aspiration, a now defunct socially conscious banking and investment firm once valued at $2.3 billion that is now under fraud investigation by the federal government. Now, just a little background here. Aspiration was a so-called green bank, and it sold carbon credits, and it's now kaput. Its founders were prominent Democrats, Joe Sandberg and Andre Cherny.
No kidding.
Sandberg has since been charged criminally with fraud with a price tag of he allegedly committed $145 million worth of fraud. And Aspiration had several celebrities among its investors and endorsers, including Robert Downey Jr., Leo DiCaprio, and Orlando Bloom. The rapper Drake, and even the Clinton Foundation was involved with Aspiration back in the day. Anyway, a little bit more from the story. According to Torrey, Leonard signed a 4-year, $28 million endorsement contract with Aspiration in April 2022 through his LLC KL2 Aspire. Now, again, this was a no-show job. He didn't do anything for Aspiration, or at least anything that Pablo Torre was able to find. He didn't even cut a commercial for Aspiration like Robert Downey Jr. did. You can find that just by searching for it. He didn't even do a single media post as far as any evidence is concerned, let alone plant any trees. Now, Sterling, let me start with you. This is probably bigger as a sports story than as a climate story, but I think the reason I brought it up is I think what it can do is it can wake up sports fans to how much of a scam, an ultimate scam, so many of these so-called climate green companies are.
Well, it turns out that not only, as Trump says, is climate change a hoax, climate solutions are fraud. One after the other after the other. This isn't the first company that's been shown to not be purchasing the land that it says it's purchasing, not be planting the trees it says it's planting to offset carbon emissions. And it's not the first time stupid celebrities have been duped into supporting these kinds of things, to saying good things and getting other people, encouraging other people to invest their money, people who are much less well off than them, probably, in these types of activities, these fraudulent activities. I mean, you only have to say you're doing something about climate for some celebrities to say, oh, let us invest. We'll cut an ad for you. We support you. They don't check. They don't have their money managers or any private investigators check to see if you're actually doing the thing. All it matters to them is you say you're doing it, and it gets the publicity that you're supposedly doing it. And then, just like so many corrections the New York Times and others have to make, front page stories saying disaster, then days or weeks or months later, on page 17 in the small print, correction.
Yep. And I just saw today a story about a like $1 billion carbon capture and storage plant in, I think, Iceland, maybe. Cost $1 billion. And over a year, it only sequestered like 1,000 tons or something of carbon, which was something like 1/10 of the amount that it had promised that it could do in a year, or even less than that.
It's probably less than it emitted in that year.
Yeah, and the energy, and someone crunched the numbers. I don't recall who I saw did it, but they crunched the numbers and they found that it emitted more than it took in. And that's like always been the obvious problem with those, especially the mechanical schemes, the big plants that suck it out of the air. It's always been a scam.
It's literally throwing money down a black hole. I mean,
yeah,
empty space.
I'm reminded of the old Beach Boys song, Barbara Ann, but it would be sung to the tune of scam, 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 scam-a-ram. That's this whole thing with these guys.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. All right. So I lost internet there for a minute. If you follow me on X, you'll know that I'm developing these laws, and the first one is Milloy's law, and Milloy's law is that green equals fraud. And green equals fraud because I have never seen anything green that wasn't fraud. And, carbon capture, whatever carbon credits, none of this stuff has any merit to it. It's all just a ripoff. And I mean, not only even if you do it legitimately, it's still fraud. So follow me for, my second law is Milloy's other law, green equals disaster. And I'm formulating the third law right now, which has something to do with communism. But I think that'll pretty much cover green, fraud, disaster, and communism.
I think it should. Your third law should be about dogs not being vegetarians, but that's just me.
Well, my comment on that was, if you just look at their teeth are made for ripping flesh, not for, chewing asparagus.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I would just say that the fourth of Milloy's law is that every time you're on this program, we have some sort of disastrous technical issue. So that's definitely going to go on your list.
Well, that's Milloy crossing with Murphy.
Stop buying those low-power green microphones.
Yeah.
Milloy's
I lost my internet connection.
Yeah, it's always something with you, Steve. It's always something with you.
Hey, but at least you can hear me.
To be fair, every time Stan is on, we have that problem too.
That is true. It's not unique to you.
It's the green sabotaging him. You fight back, Steve. You fight back.
Yeah.
That's probably where it is. All right. So now we're going to back up now. We're going to get back to item number 2, which is the climate grift clawback. We have covered this story on this show, the Climate Realism Show, for many months. We have to keep popping in when there's something new, and there is something new. And it's actually, again, good news. This is from the Federalist. Headline: DC Circuit revokes, quote, abusive injunction, barring Trump from slashing EPA climate grants. In a major win for the Trump administration, a DC Circuit Court panel lifted an injunction on Tuesday that attempted to block the EPA from terminating quote unquote climate grants to several non-governmental groups. In a 2-1 decision, the panel agreed that the EPA can move forward with cutting grants totaling $16 billion to 5 nonprofit organizations to promote the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, unquote. Judges Naomi Rao and Greg Katsas sided with the government while Judge Cornelia Pillard dissented. Writing for the majority ruling, Rao concluded that DC District Judge Tanya Chutkan, quote, abused her discretion in issuing the injunction, unquote, in the first place. The circuit judge further noted that, quote, while the district court had jurisdiction over the grantee's constitutional claim, that claim is meritless. And here's a little bit more from it, and we'll get going with some commentary. Quote, the grantees are not likely to succeed on the merits because their claims are essentially contractual, and therefore jurisdiction lies exclusively in the Court of Federal Claims, Rao wrote. Moreover, the equities strongly favor the government, which on behalf of the public must ensure the proper oversight and management of this multi-billion-dollar fund. Accordingly, we vacate the injunction. Now, just a little bit more background. This panel of judges said that, as alluded to in that decision, that this didn't even belong in a district court. District court had no jurisdiction over this case whatsoever, but the Court of Federal Claims is where it should have been. And in fact, you might have noticed in the news, the Supreme Court had about enough of this stuff from liberal district court judges who are issuing ruling after ruling to stop any order that the Trump administration comes out with, and especially when it comes to climate. They basically, liberal judges on district courts have decided that Donald Trump is not allowed to exercise his proper presidential powers. Now, Steve, you are an attorney, but we like you still anyway. So you must be happy to see this result. But the plaintiffs in this case, and then a little bit more background, included the Climate United Fund. You might remember that's Stacey Abrams's group, and she has no expertise in climate. The Coalition for Green Capital, Power Forward Communities, Inclusive, and the Justice Climate Fund. They're pretty unhappy, but taxpayers should be happy that at least $16 billion going to these instant pop-up NGOs is being brought back for the taxpayer.
Yeah, just so everyone remembers, this is the subject of that Project Veritas video of gold bars being thrown off the Titanic at the end of the Biden administration. It was a secret video recorded on a date between two guys, a blind date. Just I read that in the New York Times, so it must be true. So when Lee Zeldin at EPA canceled these grants, the environmental groups went to court suing like they had like some civil right of theirs was violated, like, you know, they had some God-given right to these grants. It was obvious the whole time that, you know, at best they would have a contractual claim against the government. And, you know, contracts can be broken at any time for any reason. There's no such thing as, you know, a contract that can't be broken. So the Trump administration canceled the grants, broke the contract. And that's essentially what the court ruled. The court rule says, okay, if you guys have a claim, it doesn't belong in federal court because there's none of your rights have been violated. You may have a contractual claim, and that should be settled in the federal court of claims, which you can file there if you want, but it may be too late. But they basically have no right to this money. They never had any right to the money. I really think these people belong in jail. I mean, there should be an investigation of the Biden EPA staff and these people at Citibank that arranged this scam. I mean, they were going to steal $16 billion. I think it's actually $20 billion from taxpayers and just wasted. So Stacey Abrams was going to use her $2 billion to buy appliances for people. I guess sort of like Obama phones. People would have Obama dishwashers or something. Who knows?
If you believe she might have drained some of that off.
Right. But the bottom line is, at best, they had a claim in contract, not any sort of federal right to the money, even though they had the grant. So, you know, good luck in the federal court of claims. It'll take forever. They won't get anything.
Yeah, it's amazing how much they think they're entitled to this money. And then, you know, when someone raises issues like well, you're not spending it correctly, or you're wasting it on something else, or whatever, they feel shocked, I say, and it's the same thing that's been going on for over 20 years. The whole climate concern has turned from a scientific issue into a grifting issue. And that's really all that's left today. There's just nothing left but the grift.
And it's not just limited to climate change, right? I'm sorry, I've read my Constitution. There is nothing in the Constitution, not a single thing. My rant is coming. That rant.
Put on your hat, Sterling. Put on your hat, Sterling.
You need a little flashing sign, rant warning. Not a single thing in the Constitution says that the federal government is supposed to give universities money. That they are obligated to fund research or student loans. In fact, I see no power to do so granted to them in the Constitution, much less some kind of obligation, enforceable legal obligation. Harvard and the others should have no leg to stand on. Yeah. Art institutions. I love art. But when they used to claim, it's censorship not to fund ludicrous art like I forget the name of the artist back in the 90s that was so controversial. No, I'm sorry. The federal government is not obligated to fund anything like that. It has very few specified obligations, and giving money to elite universities, billion-dollar funded universities to run gender equity programs or anything else, it's just not in there. It's not in the Constitution. They should have no standing to sue for these things.
Yeah, but that's really the amazing thing, Sterling. I mean, they find lawyers and judges who are willing to entertain this notion that they have a right somehow to this money. And everybody else on the planet can cancel contracts. Universities cancel contracts, I'm sure, all the time. And if you were to sue a university about a canceled contract, they would say, well, we can cancel our contract at any time. We may owe damages. We might owe, in some particular cases, specific performance. We have to do something. But anybody can cancel a contract, but they think that the government has to honor all these wacky agreements. There was no accountability in any of these agreements. I mean, this money was just gone. Sterling, you're right. Stacey Abrams, who knows what she was going to do with that $2 billion? Maybe she'd buy a few dishwashers for a few poor people, and then the rest of it would just go into Democrat election efforts.
Well, what you find sometimes again and again is that when the government has given grants to foundations, you look at those foundations, you say, okay, well, how much of their money goes into the actual program versus overhead? Suddenly they have huge staffs.
Yeah,
they have brand new, shining new offices. They've got all this money. Well, money doesn't mean you have to have a new office. You could put it all into the program. They never do.
With Harvard, I think its haircut on all this was 60%. So 60% went to overhead, and 40% went to the program. I mean, it's criminality.
If one of the charity rating services was looking at that, they'd call that a bad charity.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I think
Anthony.
if we were to start up a new organization called Climate Friendly Weight Watchers, Abrams would buy into that.
No, you won't get any hate mail on that.
Well, yeah. Well, if anybody should go vegan, it should probably be her. So it could do her some good. But look, I know this irritates, I'm sure, all of us, but especially Anthony and Steve. This whole idea that organizations like the Heartland Institute, we are a pretty small, in the larger scheme of things, 501c3 nonprofit organization, and that we're supposedly swimming in all of this dark money and all of this big oil money. Stacey Abrams, I mean, that organization she started up, the Climate United Fund, that she was going to be the head of, basically popped up literally out of nowhere. It had about $100 in its bank account, and then suddenly it gets a $7 billion grant. And as Steve pointed out, her plan was to either subsidize or outright purchase energy efficient refrigerators and dishwashers for people poor people in rural communities. Why the hell do you need $7 billion to do that? And the answer is you don't need $7 billion to do that. In fact, that whole project is even worthy of a $100,000 grant because it's stupid. But this money flows from us, taxpayers, into all these organizations. That's the real dark money. This is the exact same. We covered this on the show at the time. Project Veritas had those hidden camera exposés where the guy says, yeah, literally after the election at the EPA, we were throwing gold bars off the Titanic. That's what these gold bars are. And so that's the real scandal here. And, the idea that thankfully, a federal court or a federal district court panel said, appeals court panel said, yes, you're allowed to get those gold bars back. You get to dive down there and bring them back to the surface.
I mean, it's astonishing that it had to go that far because it was obvious. I mean, the government can cancel any contract at any time. Anybody can cancel any contract at any time. May have damages, but it's not arguable.
Do a Google search and see how many times the government has canceled contracts with defense contractors over things that have not been completed on time or not to their satisfaction, or they just moved to a different direction for the type of program.
Or anybody. I mean, there's just no such thing as, a golden contract that can't be broken.
No, green. It's a green contract, Steve. Only green contracts can't be broken.
Yes, exactly right. All right. I think I won the rant contest on that one, Sterling. Sorry, I didn't really mean to take your thing, but
that's okay.
It gets me mad.
I don't hold it against you, my son.
Thank you. All right. Let's get on to our main topic, which is Big Climate Strikes Back. This story comes from the New York Times. I'm sorry to have rereading this from the New York Times. I'm blaming Anthony. He sent me two links, one to the New York Times, the other from NPR. I flipped a coin and lost both. Yeah. So anyway, here we go. The headline here is Scientists Denounce Trump Administration's Climate Report. More than 85 American and international scientists have condemned a Trump administration report that calls the threat of climate change overblown, saying the analysis is riddled with errors, misrepresentations, and cherry-picked data to fit the president's political agenda. The scientists submitted their critique as part of a public comment period on the report, which was to close on Tuesday night, which it did. This is from their rebuttal. Quote, no one should doubt that human-caused climate change is real, is already producing potentially dangerous impacts, and that humanity is on track for a geologically enormous amount of warming, the scientists wrote. They compared the administration's report to efforts by the tobacco industry to create doubt about the health links between smoking and cancer, because of course they did. They do that every time, and it's BS. The 5 researchers who prepared the administration's July report were handpicked by Chris Wright, the energy secretary, and they all reject established scientific consensus that the burning of oil, gas, and coal is dangerously heating the planet. Those are not my words. Those are the New York Times. They acknowledged that the Earth is warming, but said that climate change is, quote, less damaging economically than commonly believed. That's enough for the New York Times. Let me just summarize here real quick, and we're going to throw it to Anthony because he's been looking into this. In their report, they had in their outline, they had 4 main points of contention with the report, which was done by our friend Judith Curry and Stephen Koonin and Roy Spencer and Ross McKitrick and John Christy, all extremely accomplished and esteemed climate scientists, by the way. But anyway, their critique, they say, 1, that was just a tiny team of handpicked contrarians. 2, that there was no peer review or transparency in this process to make the report. 3, that they cherry-picked evidence and they miscited other scientists. And 4, which I consider pretty laughable, that they operated with a predetermined outcome, which...
You mean this is an attribution study?
Yeah, the projection there is crazy. Oh, and they also, of course, mentioned that, quote, the scientific consensus remains clear on climate change. So, Anthony, you've been looking into this. The rebuttal report is 453 pages long. I don't know how deep you've been able to dig into that thus far, but where would you like to start? I mean, if you pull up the report, and Andy might be able to put it up on the screen, and a link to it is in the show notes. The table of contents in this 453-page report reads like the chapters in our Climate at a Glance series of books. They hit everything we hit.
Wrongly.
Anthony?
What's that? I'm sorry. I was trying to bring up a link here. What was the question?
Oh, well, so, you've been looking into this. I mean, they have these claims like I don't know if we want to bring it up on the screen here, but, the table of contents in the 453-page report, reads like the table of contents at Climate at a Glance, except they misrepresent the data on stuff like tornadoes, storm strength, and things like that.
So anyway, I just sent a link off to our producer, Andy. We've got a great publication on What's Up With That done by our editor-in-chief, Charles Rutter, called Science by the Pound. And literally, that's what this thing turns into. We've got 85 authors, 453 pages, and this thing is just, it's a stack. And, there's an old cartoon, I can't remember when, but it was sometime around the 70s or 80s. It was talking about doing a doctoral thesis at a college. And basically, we had all these students at the top of the stairs, and they were throwing their bundled thesis down the stairs to see which one made it the furthest, and the one that it was the heaviest one. And seriously, that's all this is. This is science by the pound. And they're looking at, again, the strength is consensus, not necessarily facts. And so when you have a document that's got 85 authors, you got to know that this is all about consensus and nothing else.
I mean, you can't write a thoroughgoing scientific report by 85 authors in less than a month. It's highly doubtful they could even communicate with each other for more than 30 seconds a day to produce something like that, if they communicate at all, as opposed to just throwing their name, as opposed to one or two of them writing the thing and the other 82 of them attaching their names to it, saying, "Oh yeah, we co-wrote this. It's important."
I just object to the whole characterization of this as science. I mean, there's no science in, all those pounds of report. To me, science is you make a prediction, you see if it, comes true, and then you repeat. And if it keeps coming true, then you're onto something. But none of these guys have that. All they have is these, sort of manufactured analyses that they call science. They have a degree in the technical field. They call themselves scientists. I don't think among those 85 people, they have a single scientific accomplishment that has benefited humanity or knowledge in any way. As soon as I saw that Andrew Dessler was in charge of putting this together, I mean, oh my God, the last run-in I had with him was in a Washington Post article where he was saying that he was denying that the 1930s heat wave. They'll say anything. They have their predetermined agenda, their leftist climate agenda, try to get more money and advance their political agenda, and they have no science. These people are the furthest thing from science.
You said they haven't benefited humanity, and I think on net that's true. But of course, they are benefiting a lot of grifters, right? They benefit.
Well, if you consider that benefiting humanity, yeah.
They benefit. Yeah, well, I know grifters screw humanity. That's what they do. But along the way, a lot of people are making in and raking in a lot of money.
Yeah.
They're creating.
On that, look, if you want, I don't understand this. If you want to be in science, then you want to discover new knowledge that really means something. And none of those 85 people have done that, or at least I'm not aware of it. And I've been following most of them for a long time. I have no idea what they've ever done. Are they, just because you have a degree in physics, chemistry, whatever, doesn't mean that you're really a scientist. Okay. You got to actually do something to earn the term. And retrospective analysis is not science. It's just analysis. You just call yourself an analyst. Okay, that's fine. But it's not what science is all about. It's offensive.
Not discovery. They have created a whole new field in psychology, environmental,
Yeah. Well, here, let me give the audience and you guys an example of, so these were officially, these are comments. So you're allowed to offer comments on government reports, and that's what this was. It wasn't a full-on report. So basically, they're pulling out the stuff that Judith Curry and Christy and all those had in their report and are rebutting it. So, I'm going to read here from page 200 of the document. You can bring it up if you want, Andy. Not 100% necessary, but it's on tornadoes. And they say here that the DOE Climate Working Group executive summary states increased frequency of tornadoes are, quote, not supported by U.S. historical data. Now, these rebuttalists write in response to that this statement is missing nuance. As detailed in comments 2 and 3 below, observational data indicate tornadoes have clustered into larger outbreaks and have shifted eastward and increased over the southeast U.S. in the wintertime.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing that is in here. And like I said, it's 453-page report. I'm going to see if we can pick more stuff out. But if you look at the scroll at the bottom there, you can go to Climate at a Glance. We have a section on tornadoes that proves that what Judith Curry et al. Had written was correct. Sterling, you want to rebut just that tornado? Or Linnea, I know you've done videos on tornadoes.
Well, part of the reason why you see an increase in tornadoes in the southeast is because the coverage has gotten so much better. That's a big part of it. And, a lot of tornadoes don't get picked up in the southeast because it's a bit more heavily forested than other parts, like the, typical tornado alley. So I don't know how much weight that claim actually has behind it. It's possible that tornado density, of occurrence has moved around over time. I would not be surprised if that was the case just by, natural occurrences. But I don't think that we have anywhere near enough data to be claiming that that's a real trend.
And I would say two things. Sorry, Steve.
No, even if that cluster has moved around, okay, so what? We live in a dynamic world. The climate is constantly changing. I mean, things can change, and then these idiots would have to show that emissions caused that. And how are they going to do that? I mean, they didn't predict that this was going to happen. They can't predict how the climate, what they consider the climate is going to change in the next 5, 10, 20. I mean, they've never predicted anything. They're not going to start today. The whole thing is nonsense.
That's wrong. They've predicted a lot. It's all been wrong. They predicted a lot of things. They've never been right once.
Yeah.
So let's not let them off the hook by saying they've never predicted anything. They have, and they're always wrong.
Okay,
now,
you're right. Well,
concerning the nuance,
when I say not predicted, I mean wrong.
Yeah. Concerning nuance, facts don't have nuance. Facts are facts. The data is the data. If they show no more hurricanes and no more severe hurricanes, then there's no more hurricanes, no more severe. Concerning where they're supposedly clumping, being something new, I'm sorry, how good was the data 150 years ago, even 100 years ago, even 75 years ago? They don't know where they were clumping before. This is a made up, they're clumping. Oh, they're breaking out in places they never broke out before. I'll wager if you go back in history, you may not see as many because, as you know, as Linnea pointed out, the coverage wasn't there. We didn't have satellites up there tracking things. We didn't have planes flying overhead. But I'll wager that you'll find historical accounts of tornadoes in the southeast.
Yeah,
just like you find historical accounts of earthquakes in the southeast. And everyone thinks so much of like Tennessee. Oh, it's geologically stable. You don't have a lot of earthquakes there. You do sometimes. It happens.
Anthony?
Yeah, I've got to say that as a former storm chaser myself, I worked with, when I was at Purdue University, I worked with the National Severe Storms Lab in Oklahoma, and I designed one of the instruments on the TOTO, the Totable Tornado Observatory, which is that thing that you saw in the movie Twister, which they pushed off the back of the pickup truck. That was a real thing. I designed one of the instruments in that. Anyway, bottom line is that tornadoes in the data have increased. Yes, the F0s, the F1s, the F2s on the Fujita scale have all increased because there is more coverage. Doppler radar spots tornado activity that could not be seen before. It wasn't until the advent of the WSR 88D radar the Doppler radar, which is now part of the National NEXRAD network, that we could see these things, right? So there's a reporting bump in, radar data that's helped this. The other thing that's happened is the storm chasers. The storm chasers have now become their own cult. And again, back to the movie Twister. And anytime there's a thunderstorm outbreak, anytime in the Midwest, there are people running around trying to find tornadoes because that's their big thrill. That's their juice, right? And so with the advent of 24-hour news networks and cell phones, where anyone can take a video and submit it to CNN in the matter of a minute or two, and CNN can put it on the air right away and say, look, it's climate change. And then, that's what's going on here. The nuance argument is bullshit.
Shh. All right. Let me just.
Do I qualify as a rant here? Is that rantable?
That does. We're Linnea, you got to get in gear here. Maybe during Q&A you can do a little rant in the middle.
I know. I'm going to pull up this question right now, though, since we're on this topic.
Right.
Kevin Burke asks, doesn't a warming Earth predict less tornadoes since there's less of a temperature gradient from equator to the poles?
Well, that's what you'd expect.
If you look at the big picture, you look at the Farrell cells, the Hadley cells, all that kind of stuff associated with global meteorology. There's going to be less strong cold fronts coming in from the north, and so tornadic activity and thunderstorms thrive on the clash between cold fronts and warmer air, particularly in the Midwest. You got your Gulf moisture, and then you've got your cold air coming in from Canada in the spring, and boom, you get this collision. And that collision is what spawns tornadoes, that along with the Coriolis forest and everything else. Bottom line is, yes, when we have a greater warmth at the pole compared to what it used to be, we're going to see less tornadoes.
Yeah. Before we get into the Q&A proper, I just wanted to pull out one other section because this and the link to the report is in the show notes, in the comments underneath the this here video. But it's a section on drought. And see, every one of these things is just like this, just like the tornado one. It says here on page 212, the drought section of the Department of Energy Climate Working Group report argued that there has been no observed trend in frequency or intensity of drought. However, this section is misleading. It often relies on a narrow definition of drought, conflating meteorological drought with other types of drought. And then it also accuses them of cherry picking studies and quoting outdated stuff. So, I just want to, again, this is another topic that we cover in Climate at a Glance. There's a new edition of that coming out very soon, by the way, but you can go to climateataglance.com and see the data for yourself. How would you address that, Anthony?
Well, we've looked at drought heavily, and there's a data set that's published by NOAA that's on Climate at a Glance. And there it is, right there. Let's scroll up. Look at that. Whoa, right there. Where's the drought? It's not there. This goes all the way back to 1895. Look at the one big spike that happened around 1951 or 52. Big negative spike there. That was well before CO2, even became an issue, well before the safe level of 350 parts per million. So what do they say about that? They don't. They're trying to nuance everything into making you believe that we have a crisis now and ignoring the hard data. And they've done the same thing with drought.
First off, they've tried to nuance what droughts are, right? Used to be the Palmer Drought Severity Index was sufficient to define a drought. Before that, it was common sense. Everyone knew what a drought was when you didn't have rain for months at a time. And so in the IPCC, in the 6th edition, they suddenly broke droughts into different types of droughts. You've got meteorological droughts. Well, that's when the rain doesn't fall, right? You've got what are the three other kinds? It's like meteorological, some kind of agricultural. I don't remember what the four are, but it's like, where did those come? That's just made up. No, a drought is a drought. Now, maybe it has different kinds of impacts depending on what kind of drought you have, depending on the drought and where it is located. But even the IPCC, they looked at it. for two types of their own definition, weird definition, not what we're the ones that are traditionalists on the definition of drought. We didn't make up new drought categories. They did. And in their drought categories, the IPCC, two of their drought categories, there's not only no evidence of climate change, no evidence that climate change has changed drought severity or number, and there's no evidence we can attribute any changes to climate change for any changes in drought and severity.
So
they've got two others, and they say, oh, but for these, in the summary for policymakers, for these, we think humans are doing something. But then you look in the data. Well, for those two, they divide the grid into 47 different regions. And for like 12 of those regions on Earth, 12 of the regions on Earth, they say, we think there are some shifts and we have medium to low confidence that humans had something to do with it. That's not evidence that humans are causing climate change.
You know,
I've started. Sorry.
Go ahead,
I was just
Linnea.
gonna say, I've been starting to think of this as kind of like climate hypochondria. Like there's just a huge number of scientists or propagandists even who if there's any change in the system at all, they will either find a way to tie it to climate change, or they will just assume that it has to be human caused, climate change caused changes. They cannot conceive of a situation in which things just change on the planet. Everything is alarming. Okay, so if hurricanes, so Judith Curry was on here a couple of weeks ago, and she said that there is some data, but not enough to be conclusive about it, but there's some data that suggests that hurricane like landfall impacts are moving west a bit over time. That's okay. Like it's not good. No hurricane landfall is good. But if hurricanes are landfalling on average, statistically a little bit more to the west, that's not a catastrophe. That's not the end times. It's going to be okay. You just have to be more prepared in areas like that, if that's even true. And so it's just, and the same thing with the tornado situation, the same thing with everything. You're not going to cause stasis in the planet's energy systems. You're just not going to. So wigging out over every single change that happens over time is a waste of time, and it's a waste of your like energy and anxiety. So it is. It's kind of like a mental illness at this point. It's a type of hypochondria.
Yeah.
It's climate.
Like that. You didn't have to.
It's climate
Two quick points. Once again, these guys don't predict droughts. They'll just find a drought, which they occur all the time, and just automatically blame climate change. Just this week, in Washington, D.C., we've had like the driest August on record going back, to the mid 19th century. And of course, Washington Post Capital Weather Gang said, well, with global warming, this is what we expect. But of course, August 2025 in Washington, D.C. was 4 degrees cooler than August 1872. And these guys just lying is like the most natural thing for them, right? I mean, all these guys. So Andrew Dessler and his 85 scientists, who cares? These people are just liars. They're gonna and the thing is, they're gonna call us deniers until the day they die, and I'm gonna call them liars until the day I die. And this is, I don't think this is going to be able to be sorted out by the public or by courts. That's why, I know this is sort of a tangent. This is why it's important for the Trump administration just to get rid of EPA's endangerment finding and cancel this whole issue. Just declare it illegal and get rid of it.
Now, the truth is, even if it shouldn't be sorted out by the courts. That's not the proper forum. If you believe at all that there is a role for policymaking vis-a-vis climate change, the only appropriate forum for that is Congress. If Congress thinks because of interstate commerce that they need to get into the climate game, it's their job to do it. It's not the court's job. It's technically, not the administration's job absent congressional action. And the fact that Congress remains silent on it decade after decade, they take up bills and then they don't bring them to the floor and vote them up or down, except for the one, the Byrd-Hagel resolution where they said, don't do stupid stuff economically. They voted on that. If Congress is silent, so also ought the courts and everybody else to be legally. Now, Linnea, we all know that we want our hurricanes to fall more easterly. We want hurricanes to stay in their lane, man. They should stay in their lane. That's where we want them. We want Florida to get hit a lot. Galveston. We don't want to lose our hurricanes. That's an awful idea.
I really like your argument, Sterling, about the fact that, that they're trying to nuance all this stuff, meteorological drought, annual drought, all kinds of special different versions of drought. What I'm really looking forward to is something like, when they nuance it into an LGBT drought or maybe a trans drought.
And it's transitioning westward.
I almost pulled the trigger on that rim shot drop right in the middle of your joke, Anthony, just to
just to get it off.
This show go just perfectly every time, but I resisted the temptation to sabotage. But all right, just one last point. I'd like Steve to address it here, or maybe anybody, and we'll go right to Q&A. There's something to do before Q&A, but we'll go to Q&A. But Steve, I find it kind of funny that now that we finally have the first government report that does not peddle the alarmist narrative in every syllable on every page. Now it's very important that scientists engage in a debate publicly about the conclusions of a government report, when for the entire time I've been doing this topic, and surely for you as well, there was no debate. The science is settled and the debate is closed. But now suddenly we have to have one.
Yeah, they've never wanted to debate. When Al Gore first started doing his slideshow, I went to one of the early events. I think it was at an Americans for Tax Reform Wednesday meeting, and I was there. And after the meeting, I went up to Al and I said, "Well, why don't we debate this?" And he was like, "Oh, that's an interesting idea." Then, of course, his staff, interrupted and. Although he told his staff, well, you should look into that. They never, they got back to me and said he didn't have time. And so that just started me on this whole, let's debate. And these guys have never wanted to debate, because every time they do, a couple times they have tried it, they've gotten trashed. I think the first one, but there was an Intelligence Squared event in New York City. I think Lindzen was there. I forget who he debated, but he clearly won. The audience came in as believers, left as skeptics. And maybe there's been a couple others, but generally, they can't defend, their views against us. And so they've never debated us. They've just, called us names. And that's where the debate remains today. So it's kind of ironic that, now they want to debate. Of course, they really don't, right? Has anybody called up, Anthony or Sterling or me or, Curry or Christy or Spence or anybody to know.
And
as a matter of fact, I just tweeted this today. New York City Climate Week is coming up in a couple weeks in New York City, and New York Times is having a climate event. It's called their Climate Forward Conference. They've got people like Bill McKitrick there. Do they have any of us or any skeptic? Do they even have Bjorn Lomborg, who would say that climate change is real? No, they don't even do that. It's just they're just talking to themselves because that's all they want to do.
Rainn Wilson, Dwight from The Office, has a spot on that panel, and but no skeptics.
For decades, they've kept their stuff secret. They fought every effort to bring transparency, not just to climate research, but to all research funded by the federal government. They've fought legislation that would end secret science. And now they're out there bemoaning the fact that these 5 people didn't go to a wider audience and work through the public as they were writing a report, unlike the 85 people who wrote their report in private and then released it as a comment on the DOE report. I forget, they didn't reach out to me. I'm not aware of any public input on that. It was all done untransparently, just as the NAS report is about to be done. But the DOE is supposed to be even more transparent and wasn't transparent enough.
Well, transparency is pretty much the only thing that can actually threaten them, right?
Yeah.
So they don't want it.
Well, there's
transparency for we, not for thee.
Look, you know what? The whole thing could be settled if they would just make a prediction that came true. Right? That's all they got to do. Just even for a year from now, just make some prediction that comes true. And they can't do it. They won't do it. They wouldn't even try.
Well,
the drought in Washington's consistent with their predictions.
They likely predicted that this August would be the hottest August in all of August that have ever existed. And as we've seen, it was actually the coolest in almost every place in the United States.
That's their theory. If I put this on my X post, if you go back and watch Al Gore's movie, he's got this cartoon of the frog. And this is their view that, the water just keeps getting warmer and more CO2, warmer and warmer and warmer. It never stops until it starts to boil. You get the frog out. That is clearly not happening. I mean, if that is their worldview, that is wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like going to a restaurant and you're seeing a menu. Climate science is like the menu where you've got all these things neatly listed, but weather is the chef's surprise.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have some business to take care of right here, and then we're going to get into Q&A. And that business is telling you about our very wonderful sponsor of the Climate Realism Show, and that is Advisor Metals. If you listen to tons of conservative shows on streams on YouTube and other places like I do, you hear tons and tons of pitches to be buying gold and silver and other precious metals. There are so many companies out there, but I want to tell you why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals. And it's the man who runs the company, and his name is Ira Bershatsky. He's the managing member of Advisor Metals. Ira does not employ high-pressure tactics or deceptive marketing ploys like many in big gold. He also doesn't deal in so-called rare coins. But so when you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you're dealing in quality bullion. That is so much better when the time comes to liquidate this very valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you will have your investment sent discreetly to your very home. And Ira, by the way, is advertising on the Climate Realism Show because he is an America First patriot. He does not donate to Democrats or Democrat cutout NGOs or anything like that. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party. And he like us, abhor the machinations of the World Economic Forum. And we are proud to have him as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio and back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals and leave your information there. And Ira will make this process very, very easy for you. Again, climaterealismshow.com/metals. And be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps us while you're helping yourself. All right. Thank you for your attention to this matter. As they say.
Just remember, we're your favorite for heavy metal.
That is for sure. All right. I think Andy, producer, is back after a little emergency at home. Are we able to set up our Q&A? Indeed, we are. Linnea, take it away.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. Okay, so here we go. We have good questions this week. Actually, we have a couple of good little science questions here. This is both Darren T. and Archie's mom had a similar question, which goes something like this. So Darren says, how do you weigh carbon dioxide? And Archie's mom says, why do the hoaxers measure carbon dioxide in tons, but we measure it in percent? And to this, I would say, well, those are two different measurements for two different purposes. But anybody else want to weigh in on this one?
Oh, that's a bad pun.
Oh, I didn't even mean to do that, but I'll take it.
Oh, there you go. It's
Yay.
even better. It's even better.
Right.
But
Now she's
we
claiming
don't weigh CO2 in the atmosphere. We look at it in terms of parts per million, in a given volume. So the weighing part of it has to do with, you're burning X amount of coal or X amount of wood or X amount of petroleum. And then there's an equation that says how much of the mass that you're burning gets converted to carbon dioxide. And then that's where the weight comes in tons and so forth. So it's just really apples and oranges in terms of, a measurement system.
Well, and when you
If
pull
there were so
carbon
many tons
dioxide
of
from the
something in the
atmosphere,
atmosphere, there were so many tons of something in the atmosphere, wouldn't we all be crushed? I don't think I could hold up half a ton, much less 600 billion.
well, I mean, I think what those carbon capture like machines do is they do take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and they split it right into carbon and oxygen. I don't know what they do with the oxygen. Maybe they burn it. I'm not sure. Or they just throw it back into the atmosphere. I have no idea. But I'm fairly certain that they do make physical, carbon out of it, which you can weigh.
Now, the people that split it huff the oxygen to get a legal high.
Oh, okay. All right. Understood. Okay. So
Steve is.
that's a question.
You're not hearing Steve again. Is it just me?
Yeah. So I think we talked about this earlier. Scott Clay says, "What about Stacey Abrams' well-known climate projects?" Yeah, those were all just
climate projects.
graphed. Yeah.
Yeah. I think all that she's done is put in a couple washing machines somewhere, right?
Well, I'm not convinced they found any that she's done. That was the point, is she was going to do all this. She was going to do. That was her plan. Going to go to poor neighborhoods around the nation. Homes don't want dishwashers anymore, but we're going to install them anyway, evidently.
All right. Engineer Guy SE says, update. How are we doing on hurricane season? We're now into September. How many weeks to go? Well, it can go through November. So we've got quite a bit longer and it has been picking up. Anybody have any details on that?
We have 14 days until normal peak. I think it's the 19th. And so far, I would say it's not on track. But that doesn't mean that in the next couple of months, it might not pick up. But so far, it's not on track. I mean, they've already come in and adjusted it downward from the preseason prediction.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's going to happen, right? We're going to get this spike of hurricanes towards the end of September. And then they'll say, see, we told you so. And then they'll say, climate change caused it to be later.
All right. Samot, who it's been a while since we've seen this viewer live in the chat. So welcome back. They say, aren't most droughts caused by humans ruining aquifers or other bad engineering? And that's one of the categories of drought, is a like aquifer depletion related drought, right?
Yeah, there's, the aquifer depletion, bad engineering, loss. I just did a story that's about what's going on over in Scotland, for example. The BBC made this big claim about, climate-induced drought is causing, low river levels and reduced water supplies and all this stuff in Scotland. Well, Scotland is one of the wettest places on the planet. I think the only place wetter is like Hawaii. But the thing is that they have a water system over there that is so antiquated and so leaky. They lose about 30% of their municipal water to leakage. And so, these are mitigating factors, that create drought. It's just it's a kind of a thing that is hard to measure because, you can nuance it all over the place, meteorological drought, aquifer drought, usage drought, whatever it is. The bottom line is that there is no discernible pattern due to climate in the long-term data for drought in the United States or in Scotland. And by the way, you can read that Scotland piece on climaterealism.com.
I think that Anthony found that they lost 8 liters or 8 gallons of water per day through the cracks in their pipes, through leaking joints. That Scotland was by far and away well above water usage, probably because a lot of it's leaking out. But it's not like they haven't had those spring droughts before. I think the story said it was the 1940s, 49, 47, something like that. At a similar
1964.
drought. 64, sorry. And then what happened? They had a supposed drought, awful water conditions in the spring, and then they started getting rain in June and July.
Yeah. Anytime there's any kind of a variation, the climate cabal spins it into something disastrous. It's just, it's their formula.
They've added 500,000 people in population and haven't added a single new water treatment or reservoir in 30 years.
How does an industrialized island nation run out of water?
Because they buy into the green. Because they buy into the green scam.
Right. Green equals disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, nah. I was gonna say, look, if the ice caps are melting and it's adding all that fresh water, then it would be a good thing to do desalinization and put the salt back in, because then you would have you'd maintain the salinity, right?
We'll know it's a crisis in Scotland when they have no more water for Scotch, and then I will be very concerned about climate change if that happens.
All right, Nothing As It Seems says, has the American Southwest been in a decades-long drought? Anthony.
What's that?
Anthony, has the American Southwest been in a decades-long drought?
Yeah, there's been some drought, sustained drought times. That's measured partially by the level of Lake Mead, but there's also a usage problem there. And that's why these drought things are so complex. They are pulling so much water out of the Colorado River and Lake Mead for Los Angeles and other cities that it gives the appearance of a drought, but it's based on excess usage. They made the same kind of claims about Lake Tahoe, and we have that on Climate at a Glance as well. The bottom line is that the West is highly influenced by the Pacific Ocean, and things like the Pacific Decadal Oscillation and El Nino dramatically affect how much water we might get in a given year as rainfall. And so when we end up with, a shift, we end up with less water. The Great Pacific Climate Shift of 77 was a perfect example. You may remember that California went through these terrible droughts where they were having all kinds of water restrictions in 78, 79. They were calling it the drought of the century, the drought of the millennia, whatever kind of nuancing labels they slapped on it. And so the bottom line is that we are all slaves to weather. Climate does not swoop out of the sky and cause an excess or a lack of something that we need, such as water. It's all about weather patterns, and that's really all we should be paying attention to.
Well, and Anthony, isn't it true that like California, or at least Southern California and Utah, where their natural condition is desert, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason.
Arizona, New Mexico. They're all Death Valley. It's called Death Valley for a reason, folks. It's not called life-giving water.
It's not called Eden.
Yeah. They're going to rename that. They're going to rename that to be a little more nuanced. They're going to call it the Undead People Valley. Yeah. Something like that.
People uncomfortable with breathing valley. But I've always wondered when they talk about drought in places that are desert. How is drought measured relative to the normal conditions there, or is drought an absolute? Okay, this is how much rainfall on average across the nation, and because look, the Southwest, the desert Southwest, it's called that for a reason, is almost constantly in drought. You compare the Sahara Desert to the rainforest of the Amazon, and if you put them on the same drought index, God, the Sahara Desert's in a multi-thousand-year drought compared to the Amazon.
Yeah, and ironically, I remember reading an article in the Bulletin for Atomic Scientists about how desertification is not turning out how the Greens have been predicted. Desertification is actually on the decline.
Yeah, you've got areas that are greening on the edges of deserts. I think we've gained 10% green mass in desert areas over the past 30 years. That's a climate prediction that didn't turn out.
Right.
Yeah, I will point out that on Climate at a Glance, we have in our topic on droughts, we have a fantastic little piece, graph there, talking about a study. It was Cook et al., I believe. It was 2005, something like that. Anyway, bottom line is they found that the Western United States had experienced droughts as long as 200 years or longer
Yeah.
over the last 2,000 years based on tree ring studies. And so drought is normal for the West Coast. And it was well before climate change was even a glimmer of an eye of a grifter. So, you know, it's just all made up worry. That's all it is. As Linnea points out, it's climate hypochondria, or as I like to call it, ecochondria.
I want to point out that one of our viewers corrected me on the splitting of carbon dioxide issue. I was getting it mixed up because I had read somewhere something about graphene, and I guess that's just what they use for absorption. But Thomas Shula corrects, and he says there's no commercial splitting of carbon dioxide into carbon and oxygen, or O2, oxygen. The only splitting currently is into carbon monoxide and oxygen, requiring a lot of energy. Most carbon capture stores or repurposes the carbon dioxide. Thank you very much for that correction.
I want to point out, because Steve and Anthony were right about this. So that you talk about Southern California. When the Europeans first made landfall in the eastern United States, Southern California was one of the least densely populated areas on the continental United States, because there's very little natural water there regularly. Native Americans didn't live there in large numbers, unlike the Pacific Northwest or the eastern United States, where they had large communities. They were scattered and far between because the water wasn't there. And this is one thing that the federal government did, whether you like it or you don't like it. They made California what it is today with the Bureau of Reclamation, damming western rivers, shipping that water across mountains and through deserts, and sending it to California. So you could make the desert, which is the charge of the Bureau of Reclamation, make the desert bloom like a rose. Well, they've done it. And people flock to there. It looks green, the weather's nice, but it was never, nature did not intend that place to have as many people living there as they did. And you can tell because the water wasn't there. Yeah. Absent federal intervention, people could not live in the numbers they live in California today. Absent federal water intervention.
All right, let's get on to another question. This is a question from frequent viewer, two-parter, so I'll pull up the first part here, from Climate Bell, who says, Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm, explains to persuade the masses to switch technology, focus on growing the early adopter enthusiasts, not trying to convince those who are resistant. Do you think applying this approach is a good one to introduce rebuttal evidence and proof that the establishment's climate narrative is a lie? If not, what strategy would you recommend? So this is the idea is like, focus on growing people who are enthusiastic about like climate skepticism, I guess. And then instead of trying to persuade the masses at large,
well, now,
who are already resistant.
Heartland has done that to some extent with our reports that we ship to school kids, right? But I'm not sure school kids would count as early adopters necessarily. CFACT does that with their college programs, and they're proselytizing through those programs. But I'm not sure how you identify early climate skepticism adopters.
Yeah,
I mean, that's our audience, right? Early adopter enthusiasts.
Yeah, but most of us are old.
I think the important thing is just to put the information out there, and if it's good information, people will pick it up. If you can't save humanity with good information, oh well, just do your best. That's what I try to do.
All right. This is a question from a viewer on X, Robin, who says, how do you keep your funding when the mainstream media like CBS, NBC, and CNN all worship climate bilge? So how do we keep our funding when the media at large is all against us? Independent
Climate
donors.
bilge. I like that name.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of people that support what we do. I mean, we're not just like some little cabal that has pulled off this amazing, feat of enlightening the world. I mean, there are a lot of people, a lot of educated people that agree with us because we're right, and the other side is always wrong. And
they care about truth. There's a lot of people that care about. There's still a lot of people that care about truth, and they see us as purveyors of the truth, and so they continue to support us despite the suppression of our views.
I mean, just recently that guy on CNN that does all their polling. I mean, he did something on climate, showing that over the past 45, 50 years, climate alarmism has gone nowhere, despite $1 trillion worth of media propaganda. And there are enough people that are still screwed into reality that we haven't jumped off the cliff.
Alrighty. This is a question from the Apologetics Forum of, Snohomish County, who says, what feedback are you seeing on CO2 saturation?
None. I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I will say this. Every time we mention we're getting very close to CO2 saturation, the feedback is people like that idea. That's all I can tell you about it.
Right. Then there's a good body of research out there on it too. All right. Question from Nude, who says, is the long-term sequestration into limestone by calcification of marine fauna measurable, or is it just neglected? We only talk about oceans and plants as sinks.
It's not really easily measurable because it's so long-term. You can't go out there with a micrometer, on some cliff or something and measure calcification. So it's all model-based, a lot like climate stuff. But you can say that given the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the known chemical processes involved with calcification, that it's going to proceed at a certain rate. So the models are reasonably accurate.
But we like CO2 anyway. We don't want to, we want CO2 for the plants, right?
Right.
Right.
Except for sterling.
The question's an important question. If you look at what we know from proxy data in history, CO2 used to be much, much higher than it is today, and that any reasonable expectation in the future, we're talking 5,000 parts per million and more. And that's not there because of the long, slow drawdown, mostly into, calcification, the rocks. And some of that's being released back when we crush these rocks for concrete, right? We're putting CO2 back in the atmosphere. But it was a dangerous, for humans, for life, it's a dangerous long-term trend. Hundreds of millions of years, if not Carl Sagan's billions and billions, we were drawing CO2 out of the atmosphere, storing it in these rocks, so that in the middle of the last ice age, we had reached 180 parts per million. 30 parts per million lower, and plants start to die because they can no longer photosynthesize. The estimates are, even with what we're putting back in here, in another 2 million years, natural processes will draw the CO2 back down to below the ability for plants to maintain life. So it's a blessing that we're putting CO2 in the atmosphere, folks.
Can you imagine how many gigabytes What's Up With That will take and will require in 2 million years, Starling?
And
We're gonna need it.
I'm going to make an AI version of myself and Charles to continue the
Anthony's brain will be in a computer system, living forever.
Goodness. All right.
brains.
Kabluna asks, did climate hysteria gain such momentum because scientists didn't take it seriously? I was a weather geek as a kid decades ago, and I always thought that this absurd idea would, blow over.
No, the first thing the leftists did was kill the opposition. If any climate any scientist or researcher or university employee that was a climate skeptic or government employee that spoke up or even thought the wrong thing, they got rid of right away. Sally Balyunas, that dude in Arizona, I forget what his name is.
Bob Balling.
Robert Balling. Yeah, Balling. When Obama came in, any NOAA employee that was, ideologically unreliable, they got rid of them. So you can't even think this stuff anymore. I mean, remember what Michael Mann did with science editors. I mean, there's questioning was not allowed. It's still not allowed, and it's not getting better. I don't know how science is going to move forward from the position it's in now, and worse, this whole thing has gotten much bigger than climate. It affects every field now. You can think the right way, or you can't think at all.
Look, it all started. He asked about the science community rising up. The science community began to be co-opted by big government after World War II, the bomb. A concerted effort by scientists brought together by government, and government, for the first time ever, started funding big science. Yeah. Now, government doesn't shrink. It grows, and it tends to support things that allow it or encourage it to grow. Nothing bad happened today. Nothing's changing the climate. Doesn't fill federal coffers. It doesn't expand agency missions or staffing, more importantly, and levels of funding. So the money flows to those who find bigger role for government, and scientists in the climate field have found that. So the scientific community has been co-opted. Dwight Eisenhower warned about that in his farewell address. Everyone knows about the military industrial complex that he warned about. It's very famous. But if you read his whole speech, he warns about the science and government complex of scientists being co-opted by government and government being co-opted by some kind of scientific elite. And it's happened. He was prescient.
Yeah, I would say to that, the big thing that used to be said, after Watergate, follow the money. Now, when it comes to climate science, what we should be saying is follow the grift.
Well,
How dare you?
Excuse me, Greta. We don't have a whole lot of time left. We've gone pretty well over our standard time, even for how long we usually go over our standard time. But I want to bring up one more question, just for, we have quite a few people who are new to watching the show, and they might be new to the the whole debate and the history of it that's gone on for a long time here. We kind of get into this comfortable groove where we're talking about the same old names that we've been talking about for decades, and not everybody is going to be privy to a lot of that. So for our last question, I'm going to bring up this one from Dwayne Manzel, who says, who actually dreamed up the carbon dioxide hoax? And I thought that'd be a good one to end on.
That was, the person that got it started was Dr. James Hansen of NASA GISS in June of 1988, and I'll tell you the backstory there. He got a sponsor, Senator Timothy Worth of Colorado, a Democratic senator, who basically he convinced Worth that there was this crisis, and then they decided they were going to go pitch it to Congress. Well, what they did was they contacted the Weather Bureau back then and asked them, what is going to be the hottest day of the month of June? Because we need to know this for something. So the Weather Bureau gave them the forecast, and they decided then to schedule the hearing on that particular day. The night before, they went into the hearing room, disabled the air conditioning, and opened the windows so that the next morning and next afternoon, the room was hot. And they did this for effect because they knew there would be TV cameras there, because they made a big splash with press releases about this. And so the whole climate hoax was born that day in June of 1988, with people sweating and then talking about how global warming is going to kill us all and how we have to throw money at it in order to save the planet. That's when it really got started. But the seed of that goes back to people like Carl Sagan, who were talking about the runaway greenhouse effect on Venus and so forth. And they used that as a scare tactic as part of that presentation and the models and so forth. Bottom line is that if their science was so strong, why did they have to use all this stagecraft and make people sweat in order to convince them that we had a problem? it was just a sideshow going on to basically make it more dramatic, and it worked for them, and we're still paying the price today.
The idea of CO2 warming actually goes back much farther. That's Sven Arrhenius, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, Nobel Prize winner, by the way, who posited that CO2 would cause warming, and yet he wasn't very alarmed about it. He thought it would be a blessing because it would help crops grow and feed growing populations. And I would argue that his view was right, and all the other scientists since then have been wrong.
Yeah.
And then, just real quick, in the 1950s, I think in the U.S. it got started going with people like that guy Keeling, that started the Keeling curve and monitoring CO2 in Hawaii, and also Roger Revelle, Al Gore's mentor. And then there was and based on their concerns, there was like a 1965 report for the president about global warming, and Carl Sagan piled on, but it never really got warmer. It just got cooler until 1980.
Yeah. What I found interesting in the story that Andy had brought up on the screen is that the lead of the story said that the Earth has been warmer in the first 5 months of this year than in any comparable period since measurements began 130 years ago, and the higher temps can now be attributed to a long expected global warming trend linked to pollution. That has a lot of BS in it, but what I love is the idea that he was so innocent back then. It was only then. So I guess January 1988 is the day that global warming began because of CO2. All the other emissions before 1988 didn't increase in temperature at all. It was only then. It made those 5 months warmer, and so now we can attribute it to it. And it shows you, as Steve Milloy's website says, how long junk science has been with us and affecting public policy. And it's been a long, long, long time.
Yeah, and I want to, mention to make it clear, we're not on board with the idea that like carbon dioxide has no impact whatsoever on regulating temperature on the planet. It's just that it's, human emissions of carbon dioxide are not causing a catastrophe. I think that would be fair to categorize our point of view as.
It's the emissions. It's not that there's no greenhouse effect, even though that's a misnomer. CO2 does, warm the atmosphere, but it's the emissions we're worried about.
Yeah, you say all the time on X, Steve, it's like, where's the warming? If every single human emission of carbon dioxide is supposed to have a warming effect, where is it?
Every
consistently that way.
Well,
it isn't.
Well, people like Will Happer, they can calculate, the sensitivity to emissions, but I don't know, it's just you can't demonstrate the effect of emissions. I guess that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that will do it for today's show. We ran long. This is not the longest show, but it's probably top 5. But that's great because we have such a very engaging and wonderful audience. So I want to thank all of you who are hanging out in the chat with us today on YouTube, Rumble, and X. And be sure to bring some friends to join us live as well. The more the merrier, and it's always a lot more fun. I want to thank our streaming partners, Junk Science, CFAC, the CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. Thank you, producer Andy, behind the scenes. And thank you very much, Steve Milloy, for being on with us today. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and I know you'll be on once again. That'll do it for the show today, and we will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.